Well, Brian and I were wanting to be part of grace groups, and we weren't sure in the very beginning what role we would have, whether that was to be a leader or to be in a grace group. And because Brian had been about a year or so diagnosed with cancer, and an aggressive form of cancer that typically takes someone's life in about 3 to 6 months. But God was answering prayers, and He was doing great, and so we decided that we wanted to step into serving together, and we decided to be grace group leaders. And when we started to be grace group leaders, it was because we wanted to serve others. What we didn't realize is that our grace group was going to end up serving us. By October, Brian started to really have a raspy voice and was having a hard time speaking, and we went into the doctor, and things weren't going so great, and there was just kind of this steady decline. And we almost had to go into the hospital. Brian had to go into almost immediately. And when they were trying to get set up for him to be able to come home, it was all at the last minute. And I called the grace group, and I was like, I got to get all the furniture moved because they're coming with the big hospital bed, and I don't know where, to put everything. And Pam and Dwayne, they are in our grace group. One called to them, and they were on the road. They were also on vacation, but they called their kids, and their kids came over and moved all the furniture around to make room for, hospital equipment and that type of thing. And people were just there by our side the whole time. When Brian had to go to hospice, 2 other people were there, Janet and Mike O'Neill, and met me really at the hospice place, and just sat with me and cried with me, and with Brian as well. And on Tuesday, the grace group said, we normally meet. And I said, well, do you want to come up to the hospice place? And they said, sure. And Brian wasn't really able to talk much at that point. And everybody showed up, and we were talking and praying, and it got to the end, and Brian was just kind of listening and had his eyes closed. And I'll never forget, I leaned over to him and I said, do you want to pray? And he broke out in this most eloquent prayer and touched on what everyone had said around the bed. And we knew God was there, and God had given him the strength to be able to have such a coherent presence and able to articulate a prayer that I know all of us in the grace group will never forget that moment. That was on a Tuesday, and Brian passed away on Sunday. But without the grace group carrying me through not only that point, supporting Brian and I, but in the aftercare, I can just think of just this last weekend, Pam Kelly, I was sitting there in front of them, sitting next to my dad, and a song came on, and I was kind of emotional. Didn't expect all this. But she just reached over and squeezed the back of my shoulders and my arm, and they know me, they know our circumstance, they loved Brian, they demonstrate on a regular Jesus' hands and feet to me when I am hurting. And that was 2 years ago, and I still feel them just as strong around me as I did then.